Hello, Africa, and welcome to AAU Talks on AAU TV. My name is Irene Dufie Addai, and I'm going to be your host for today's discussion. And to me to do this virtually is Dr. Lavern Samuels, who is a Director, International Education and Partnership, Durban University of Technology, South Africa. He is also the chair of the Directors Forum and past president of IEASA of International Education Association of South Africa. Do stay tuned and keep watching AAU Talks on AAU TV.
When you think of a university, you think of a place where you will go to cut out your future. And when you get there, you realize there's a lot more to it. The beautiful structures, facilities, and ambience. A place where you meet great minds, learn from each other, experience different cultures, as well as master the art of fundamental problem solving. Be part of a whole different study experience with Kampala International University, KIU, exploring the heights.
Hello, Doc, and welcome to AAU Talks on AAU TV. We are privileged to have you here in our studios. How are you doing, Doc?
Hello, Irene. I'm doing really well, thank you. And thank you very much for the invitation. And it's really my pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you very much. How have you been coping? The pandemic just hit us unawares and we had to do something. So how are you coping, Doc?
Well, we go through many phases of coping. And I point now where we've accepted that this is going to be with us for some time.
Right.
And we've put a whole lot of measures in place to work as best we can. But it is a challenge, and every day we deal with this evolving pandemic. And, we find new ways of coping each day.
Right. So how has it been in South Africa in general? How has it been? How have you been coping? What are some of the governmental policies that has been put in place for COVID mitigation in your country?
Well, we started off in the middle of March with a state of national emergency, and that was where some measures were put in place about warning the public about what had to be taken as precautions. A week later, our president declared a national lockdown, and that type of lockdown has since been classified as a level 5 lockdown.
Right.
With very, very strict social distancing measures, lots of businesses being closed, economic activities brought to a virtual standstill, except for some emergency services. For example, the food industry, hospitals had to be maintained. And we moved to down, which had more aspects of our economy reopened. And currently we are in level 3 of now. Even though level 3 of the lockdown means that we have a more open economy and more activities, it doesn't mean that the danger is any less. In fact, we have not peaked yet in terms of the pandemic. And we are, we've opened the economy because it's just not viable for it to continue unopened. Lives and livelihoods both have had to be considered in all of this.
Right.
But our government have taken very prompt measures in dealing with it. But it is a very challenging situation, and it takes everyone to play their role in order to make a difference.
Yeah, we can all agree as the situation or the problem cuts across all borders. And so we are discussing internationalization of higher education during and after COVID-19. And Doc, when you were speaking, you talked about the measures that the government put in place. How has it affected education and all for us before we even zoom into higher education?
Well, I think one of the first actions taken by our government in South Africa, and it was mirrored in many other countries, is the closing down of schools and universities. Right. Schools and universities have a concentration of large numbers of people. So the danger in these environments were recognized early on. And these were either closed early for the holidays or they were just shut down as an emergency measure.
Right.
And of course, it then gave us time to think about how we would address the situation.
Mm.
And many forms of remote learning were introduced. And these forms of remote learning have expanded over time. And we've reached a point now where some students have returned, where the type of work that they do requires contact, like health sciences students that need to do clinical work. But by and large, students are still studying remotely. And this will continue for some time while we assess the situation as the curve of the pandemic, the trajectory is studied on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. And so we know that the COVID is going to affect the university's admissions and academic. What's your view on that? Is COVID going to affect international students flying into various countries and then to learn or study?
Yes, I have no doubt that in the short term, there will be an effect. There will be fewer students flying to different countries to study. And this will be both in terms of full degree students, but also in terms of those students that do short-term mobilities at universities.
Right.
So it will affect the students have, but equally it will affect universities in terms of the footprint that these students leave when they visit these universities.
Right.
So we are hoping, though, that in the medium term, that this will be addressed, and that, as the effects of the pandemic pass, that we will slowly find a new normal. Right. However, I think the economic situation of the world will also continue to play a role in the medium term. Right. And academic mobility may never quite get back to where they were prior to the pandemic.
Right. And so we know that internationalization, of course, boosts profits for universities. Is it time for us to diversify our resource mobilization strategies as African universities? Because we know this is our traditional means of getting money funding universities. And so is this a way that we should find new strategies which African universities can mobilize resources?
Yes, I think we have to work smarter. We have to find opportunities in this crisis. In every crisis, there are threats, but equally there are opportunities. And I think this is our opportunity to deal with issues like the bandwidth right. on the African continent, the cost of data, accessibility. And we've got to actually advertise and market the continent far better. In spite of attracting numbers of students to the continent, I don't think we've optimized the opportunities that we have. And very often in Africa, it hasn't been a for-profit motive. It's largely been an intercultural dimension, right. an academic dimension, quality dimension that has right. driven internationalization. And I think we need to find a balance between the two. Countries like Australia, New Zealand can remarkably well with internationalization right. and the contribution it makes to the economy. And I think Africa has this opportunity to reimagine itself as a destination for international students and find this balance between the different motives and rationales for internationalization.
Right. And so for us, for some of us, we are traveling to different countries. We are traveling to specific institutions because of the culture, because of what we know the school stands for. And so I have a friend who has this affinity to go to Oxford because we know what Oxford stands for. And so how would it be now that probably you can even get to Oxford, but you will not have a feel of having a lot of students, the culture? How do we manage that for new or freshmen who have this expectation but have to deal with it because of the pandemic?
Irene, I think university campuses will be different in the next few years. Right. We will have somewhat less diversity. But I think there's also a role for the local community to step in and to provide that diversity. often, international students rely on the university for their cultural experience.
Right.
I think the local communities in different countries should also step in and be part of that experience. I think universities need to reach out into the local communities around universities to play a larger role. And
Right.
in many countries, there's a rich diversity, even in these local communities. So what might change at the university campus level can be mitigated by reaching out into society.
Yeah, that brings out the point of the importance of societies that we live in during these times. And so I wanted to ask, how prepared are universities in terms of organizational and systemic management to receive international students if the COVID still persists in the coming years?
I think universities are developing protocols in the months since the start of this pandemic.
Right.
We've become more knowledge, and knowledge is power. And so we've learned many things about what can limit the spread of the virus. We've learned about hand hygiene. We've learned about the use of masks. We've learned about social distancing. And I have no doubt that these protocols will help us in a safer environment. But for as long as the virus is around, and for as long as we don't have any effective vaccine or effective, there will always be a threat. Deny this. I think being denialist about the threat actually is not a healthy approach to it. We have to accept that we are dealing with the challenges, and we have to do the best we can to operationalize what we do within strict protocols.
Right. And so since we are talking about operationalizing and strict protocols, we are also talking about a healthcare system. I know for South Africa, there is a robust healthcare system, and then we know of the others in Africa. And so do you think that because of our healthcare systems, it would prevent some students or some lecturers from flying into Africa, especially to come continue their education?
For now, that may be the case because we are really in a very acute phase of the challenge. But I think going forward, that shouldn't be a problem. If we have a vaccine, for example, if we have effective treatment, I'm sure that these two will be available on the African. But we have to think about prevention rather than cure. There are countries that have dealt with this problem without spending huge amounts of money. I always look at the Cuban health system and I marvel at how they are able to do what they can using primary healthcare approach, about working smartly and harnessing what we have. I think in the short and certain term, we're not able to evolve in terms of our health systems to get to where many Western countries are. But what we can do is work smartly to enforce primary healthcare programs and use prevention as our largest weapon rather than a very expensive curative prevention in Western countries.
Right. And so, and in general, do you think we are ready as a continent, we are ready to open our borders, we are ready to open our borders to students coming through, since we are talking about basic healthcare systems and we have that here on our continent?
I don't think we're ready just yet, Irene. I think we really have to see the trajectory of the pandemic evolve a little further.
Sure.
And, we've got to allow this time to pass. So I think probably early in the new year, we might be able to comment on that. But for now, it's still very, very risky. There are some countries where the virus is spreading at such a rapid rate. To allow students from those countries into our borders now would be very, very risky. Even testing 100% because sometimes people don't test positive at the time that they enter your country and
Right.
later on become spreaders. So I think for now, it's, erring on the side of being conservative is probably a better approach. Let's contain the situation. Let's
First.
see how the medical options evolve. And then probably in the next 6 months, a better idea on how we can actually go forward with international student mobility programs and do it as safely as possible without risking those students and the lives of local communities.
Right. And so we know that we are not ready, and so what we are doing is virtual education. Do you think as a continent we are fully prepared to go full virtual education? And what will be some of the challenges that we are going to face if that will be the only option for us as at now?
I will answer, Irene, is that we are not ready for virtual delivery of the program. But having said that, there are very few countries that are. We saw the president of France speak at the inequalities, devices and data provision in his school system.
Right.
And they went back to opening schools because more than 1/3 of students in French high schools did not have access to devices and data. We've seen similar challenges in the UK. I don't think education is meant to be delivered completely on virtual platforms.
Right.
The type of engagement you have at university campuses is an essential part of education. We need the formal curriculum to educate that we envisage students. And besides, there are certain programs that don't lend themselves to be entirely virtually driven. I look at health sciences programs, engineering programs, science programs, programs that need industry experience.
Right.
Those programs completely on online platforms. I think there's a whole lot can do compared to prior to this pandemic. But we are not ready to do that now. And I think the option we need to be considering for the medium to long term. There has to be that balance between online engagement and activities that go on in person on university campuses.
Right. And so we know this is one part of the challenges. So can you also give us more of the challenges that we are facing in regards to internationalization of higher education in Africa?
Well, I think one, the fact that international travel has come to a grinding halt is probably a big challenge. And I think we might well find that even when the pandemic is over, that some airlines just don't take to the skies the way they used to. And we might find less air connectivity than we've had previously.
Right.
So you might find some air being serviced the way that they were. So, even international travel will be a challenge.
Right.
I think the global economy being on a downturn will get people to rethink about mobility programs. I think the funding at universities will also be challenged. Because the funding to universities also become a challenge.
Right.
And I think there will be competing issues at universities. So internationalizing some meetings may not be seen with the same degree of priority that it was previously. But we as international education practitioners, I think of it in different terms. We see that the interconnectivity that is needed in the world is now even more heightened. There's an amplified need for it.
Right.
It's about the world working together. And if anything, this pandemic has shown that no one country can deal with their issues in isolation. The need to have that standing. to create global citizens, to genders who understand the world in its entirety as a whole rather than of its some parts, has become even more important.
Right. So I would want to ask, what are some of the strategies you would share as an expert in internationalization? What are some of the strategies that universities could do or look to bounce back on the plane when the pandemic is brought down?
Well, I think the first, and that is about using virtual platforms.
Right.
And my university has been engaged in collaborative online international learning for a number of years now, and we already have a number of projects that have been going on during this period. We are going to ramp that up,
Right.
have more forms of collaborative international learning. We are also broadening of international virtual exchange and international virtual, so that it's accessible to far more of our students and our staff than previously was the case. We are also looking at conferences taking online forms of delivery where information can be disseminated online. Researchers, for example, can continue with their collaboration of not being able to visit each other readily. And I think the other form of internationalization that has often been underplayed is the whole issue of internationalization at home, where we can use local diversity to teach internationalization.
So thank you, Dr. Lavern Samuels, for joining us today. And before we wrap up, can you give your final words to African universities, since internationalization is very important for us to move on in higher education?
Irene, I think what I said earlier is important. It's about finding your place. And as we reimagine the world during this time, it's for us to take this opportunity to take our right international community of universities in the academic world. And I think we've got to look at opportunities and seize them as we flux in higher education. There is a really nice African proverb that speaks about the lion and the story, and it goes like this. For as long as the lion does not have a storyteller, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So we need to step up and we need to narrate our own story, our place as a unique offering in higher education. We have expertise that are often unsung heroes of the academic world, and we've got to step up and play our role. And there is no better as the world steps back and reflects on where it is and reimagines itself.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Lavern Samuels, for joining us this morning. It has been an insightful conversation, and then we know that we will come back to you in anything on internationalization. And we are grateful for your time, and then best wishes to you and Durban University in South Africa. We hope that you keep safe, you keep well, and everything goes on smoothly for us here in Africa. So thank you, Doc, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Irene. It's been my pleasure to be with you this morning, and I look forward to our future engagement and our best wishes from Durban University of Technology to all our colleagues who are on this talk show today, watching it live, and we look forward to our engagement.
Yes, Doc, very well. It has been AAU Talks on AAU TV. Keep watching.